welcome to episode 9 of the Multinational Money Podcast.
Welcome to the Multinational Money Podcast. I'm Johnny, your host, and if you're interested in expat life, financial freedom, and making the most of global opportunities, then this is your podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by Lámidé Elizabeth, a content creator on YouTube. Lámidé is originally from the UK and began a career in investment banking in the UK before moving to Dubai. But at the same time, she documented her professional experience and shared aspects of her life around financial freedom and building wealth, which she continues to do to this day. I'm very excited to talk to her, hear about her journey and the lessons that she can share that have helped her to be successful along the way. So, hope you enjoy the episode, guys. Let's get right into it. Okay, Lámidé Elizabeth, welcome to the Multinational Money Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you. Congratulations on, is it your newfound financial independence? Because I know you recently quit your job, which we'll obviously talk about in the episode, but were you financially independent before that?
I would say that everything that was there for me to be financial independent was in place. I just wasn't acting on it yet. Like nothing massively changed from when I was working till when I quit, except the fact that I quit. So at the back of my mind, I always knew that like if I was to leave my job, I'd be fine. So yeah.
Okay, great. So then, yeah, congratulations to your new life for freedom.
Thank you.
Great. So we'll get started. So tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you come from.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a very broad question, but I guess maybe I'll start from the fact that I'm from the UK. So I was actually born in Canada, but I grew up in the UK, in London. That's where I went to university. So I studied economic history at the London School of Economics. And then I went on to work in banking. So I joined JP Morgan in London. I did that for 2.5 years, basically the completion of a grad scheme. And then when I finished my grad scheme, I then went to work at Citibank in Dubai. And I did about 14 months there. And that was when I decided to quit. And then, basically go into this life of like financial independence. Or also I would say like probably just being self-employed and working on my own stuff, but also benefiting from a level of financial independence as well.
Yeah, very nice. I think a very broad question, but you summed it up perfectly in very little time as well. So great answer.
Thank you.
And so we kind of touched on it in the intro. So you were in banking and then you recently made the decision to leave the corporate world. So what was the catalyst for you to make that decision to leave the corporate world?
The catalyst, I would say that it was a couple things. In one hand, I felt like I was getting to a point where I felt like my learning was slowing down a little bit. I remember I listened to an interview one time and the guest was basically saying that he saw his work experience. So like when he first graduated, the jobs that he did as like an additional master's, right? So like, it wasn't like, oh, this is a long-term career for me. This is something that I'm going to use to climb the corporate ladder. It was more so like, this is another master's degree. This is another degree. I'm going in to learn as much as I can and take away all the useful information that I can and then use that to do something else. And so I felt like my rate of learning was slowing down quite a bit. I guess at some point with corporate, sometimes you get to a point where it's like maybe it takes you like 6 months to a year to get up to speed with the job, and then the next part of the jobs are more about like managerial skills rather than actually like the knowledge that you're learning. So there was that part of it, and I felt like all of my skills weren't being fulfilled in corporate. I felt like it satisfied one side of me, but there was another side of me that I felt like I wasn't exploring. And I think it's like with corporate, right? It's very easy for people to say that they are underpaid or they feel like they want to be paid more because you might see like values in yourself, right? You might be like, oh, I know how to do this, and that. I should be paid more. But if you're not able to exercise that within your role, then they're never going to pay you more because, well, what you're doing is like the role is very systemized, right? Especially at like the analyst or associate level, what you're doing, you're easily replaceable, right? And the roles are often built to be that way because, well, a business Like no one's going to build a business that relies on one employee, right? Especially not like at a big scale. So you're not that important because the role that you do is very like well defined. So I felt like I was very constricted and only one side of me was being explored. And I really just wanted to get to a place where the things that I was doing was like, I am being stretched in ways that I want to be stretched. I don't want to be stressed about working with people that I don't want to work with, or like delivering on a fake deadline that you have created. I'd rather be stressed about like things that I feel like are going to come back to me. But I just say like in terms of like triggering points, I feel like politics, like office politics as well, is often like, for me, is like, ugh, I'm just tired of dealing with this. I don't want to have to pretend to suck up to someone for someone to see my worth, or I don't know. There was a lot of things that I was seeing that I was like, ugh, I'm tired of playing this game.
Okay, yeah. I think it's very interesting, the points you make, particularly because it seems from your perspective it was more about fulfillment and finding purpose in what you were doing. Whereas I have friends and I know people who've been in like investment banking and they see it as like, I don't know, a quicker means to an end. Like it's, I'm going to go in this for like 5 years, get the bag and then, you know, that's it, move on to something else, or until I burn out and then kind of call it quits. But for you, it sounds like you didn't go in with kind of the end in mind. It sounds like it was something you were really interested in and wanted to follow up doing. And then in the end, it didn't turn out quite like that.
So no, actually, I think, so what I explained was more so why it happened when it did, but I always knew that I was never going to climb the corporate ladder. But my initial deadline was like 30. I was like, okay, when I'm 30, that's enough time in terms of experience. I'll be at a senior level. That would be a good time to leave. So I think I always actually went in knowing that I was going to leave like sooner than most people would exit a traditional career. But those other factors were kind of like why it happened earlier than when I expected it to.
Yeah. I mean, seeing one of my friends in it, it's like, it's a very difficult career to sustain long term, given the hours and the pressure that comes with it. So I think, it's something I see a lot of people do. So your YouTube channel, content creation, and your various business activities you have, because I see you have courses as well. You kind of started this whilst you're in your investment banking career. It's not something that kind of started following that. But how did you get started in that? What made you want to start a YouTube channel?
What made me want to start a YouTube channel? There were a couple key points, I would say. I think with me, it's always like a kind of like a build up. I think there was one time I was watching this YouTuber. I've watched YouTube for like maybe like at least 10 years now, I think. Yeah, like over 10 years. I'm very early adapter of watching YouTube and like following YouTubers. And I remember this was actually whilst I was at university. I was watching a particular YouTuber and she was like, I have like certain financial goals that I want to hit. And she was like, this month, my goal is $50,000 for this month, how much I want to make. And she was like, I kind of want to continue that like for the following months or something like that. And I was like, that shocked me because I was like, at that point I was at university and like one of the best jobs you could get was going to pay you £50,000 a year. And then to hear a YouTuber say, oh, I want to make £50,000 this month, I was like, oh, no way. And I think at this point, YouTube and being a content creator probably wasn't taken as seriously by people. People kind of saw it as like, oh, this is not like a real job, or like you can't make real money for this, or like, oh, what's going to happen when the internet disappears? Your job is going to be gone. And people were still having that kind of mindset towards it. But when she said that, I was like, oh my God, there's actually real money in this. And I also used to watch a lot of like, bigger YouTubers, maybe like Ali Abdaal and stuff like that, and people who were making multiple streams of income. And I always saw that a lot of the time for young people who had multiple streams of income, being a creator or being a YouTuber was kind of like an enabler of those income streams. And so I was like, okay, this seems like something that could be cool to get into. And I started out like creating content to help people get into banking, because I think at that point, banking can be kind of seen as something that only people who have connections or who are like, I don't know, part of some like elite squad can get into. And I was like, well, I managed to get into this and I didn't come from the traditional background. So I'd love to share with other people how they can also get into investment banking without if they didn't have like any family members or like, uncles or whatever that was already in banking. So that's kind of how it started.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And what year was that more or less when you saw that opportunity on YouTube?
2020 was when I started.
Okay, yeah. Round about the same time I started on YouTube as well, because before that, like you, I'd been watching YouTube for a long time, but it was mainly like basketball highlights, funny videos, pranks, that kind of stuff. But then, when it started to become like an actual educational resource, then I also saw kind of like you, okay, this is something that I can explore and make the most of. So you started out with content about helping people get into banking. When did you make the shift to more, I would say your content is now more lifestyle related, kind of personal finance, a little bit about living abroad, and mixing it together. It's kind of like, a lifestyle motivational channel, I'd say. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess my channel's slogan at the moment is building wealth with no borders, but that's something that kind of has come together recently. So I think things first shifted when I bought my first property in the UK. So that was like the first shift, because then I was documenting that process. And then obviously if you're talking about like purchasing a property, then finances is a big one, like it's a big part of it. So then people start asking, okay, how did you save? How did you do this? So then I started to get into all of like that stuff. So it was a lot of like personal finances, like investing and stuff like that. And then when I moved abroad to Dubai, I feel like that was like, as someone who talks a lot about finances and stuff like that, I felt like it was actually a really good strategic move to make. And then, I don't know, I think the world just kind of opened up for me from then on, like the possibilities that you open up for yourself when you start traveling or like consider relocating, etc. So then, so it kind of happened naturally and gradually. And I think is at the point now where it's like, okay, I know what my channel is about, and it's about like building wealth with no borders, essentially.
Yeah, I love the slogan, by the way. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
Interest rates in Europe have increased significantly over the past few years. And whilst that should be good news for savers, it's not always the case if the banks in your home country aren't increasing the rates that they pay on deposits. Fortunately, there's a way to make sure that you have access to the highest interest rate deposits that are available, and that is Raisin. Raisin is an online platform that connects banks across Europe that are offering high interest rate deposits and high interest rate savings account with potential clients that may not necessarily be in the same country as that bank. That means that someone living in Spain could access bank deposits and savings accounts that may be in Lithuania, Italy, and Portugal, where there may actually be better offers in those banks than there are in Spanish banks. With each offer available on the website, you can see what is the minimum deposit, what the minimum term is if it is a deposit. You can also check if you can break that deposit early to have access to your money ahead of the expected maturity date. And you also see what deposit protection schemes are available for your money in that bank based on which country they're in. I've been using Raisin for almost 2 years now, and I'm very happy with the diversification it offers and the access to those higher interest rates, which means I get the best interest rate on my savings. Click on the link in the video description on YouTube or in the show notes on the podcasting platforms. Back to the episode. Did you ever go into YouTube with the idea of it being your full-time like your full-time business, full-time activity, or did you see it as just a supporting activity whilst you worked? Or did you see it as like, when you got to the end of your career, did you see that as like, okay, this is my escape plan, this is what I'm going to do after that?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And the answer is I never have wanted to be a full-time content creator, to be honest. I don't even consider myself to be a full-time content creator now. Just the reason being is I think I've always enjoyed YouTube like as a side thing. Like I feel like I get the most enjoyment out of it when it's on the side, because then I have my actual life going on, and then YouTube is kind of like helping to document it, but then also sharing some helpful lessons as I go about it. Whereas I feel like if I was to become a full-time YouTuber, then I don't think it would complement my content as much. And I think also sometimes it becomes less relatable in a sense, because then like a lot of the people who were following me, for example, were also people who were working in corporate or like had their own careers going on. And I think when you then become like a full-time YouTuber, like the majority of your audience can't relate to that sometimes, because obviously that's not who they are. So it was never part of my plan to like be a full-time content creator, but I was always going to like leverage YouTube to create something, you know, like how they say, like, you know, an audience is the new currency. So I always had that at the back of my mind, like, yeah, like this is something that can definitely enable me to quit my job or leave my job, but I never wanted to become like a full-time content creator, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's very interesting as well, because despite not wanting to become a full-time content creator, you're still pretty consistent with how often you upload and the frequency of your videos, which is really cool. But yeah, definitely being able to keep some level of relatability by having a life outside of content creation, I think is good. And since you mentioned Ali Abdaal, I was watching one of his videos this week, and he mentioned something about finding that like going full-time with content creation. And he said a lot of full-time content creators he knows are very stressed because their income, their business depends on that. Whereas his approach, he suggested, was have a business and then YouTube is like pocket money.
Yeah, I think I watched that same video as well. Was this the one that was kind of like on Focus or something like that?
It was. Or it was like, the title might have been like, when you think you're doing too much.
Yeah. And he was like advising one of his subscribers, right?
Yeah,
I think that was the one. Yeah, I watched that as well, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, it's a great video, and as well, I think it's something that I started doing kind of this year as well, because up until last year, I was like pure like content creation, grow my YouTube. This is where the money's coming from, kind of thing. But I think you do have to kind of build some kind of business around it if you want it to be sustainable and long term, because YouTube could, not that it's going to happen, but like disappear tomorrow, and then so does your entire business as well, if that's where all your income is. Let's talk more financial independence now. So when did you get started? It was when you kind of saw that first creator that you thought, this is something I want to do. And was financial independence something in your mind at that time?
So I will start by saying that like I actually don't consider myself as like part of the FIRE movement. I actually probably have a little bit of an issue with it to an extent. So I think I first heard about FIRE maybe like 2-3 years ago. It's not something that I was that familiar with, but I remember someone commented it on my YouTube channel, like when I made like an investing video. I've always been someone who's been like, you know, live below your means and invest as much as you can, because the compound effect. So the earlier you get started, the better. And I think with our age group, or like Gen Z, Millennials, we are getting so used to like spending all of our money on like just stuff. I think we are like hyper into like overconsumption and hyper consumerism, and that was something that like I read a lot of personal finance books. So I think maybe that's probably the start. I think I was 18 when I picked up Rich Dad Poor Dad, so I started very early in terms of like getting into the mindset of like, okay, like you invest your money, etc. But I think maybe my first insight into the lifestyle that I'm living now is the 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. I don't know if you've read that. Yeah, I think that was like the first insight into like, I think he was the first one to kind of like talk about the corporate career in a very like, I don't know, in a way that didn't make it look as sexy as it can look, especially because I went to a university where like everyone is like, I want to go into corporate law, corporate banking, investment banking, or whatever. That was like the pinnacle of everything for everyone, almost everyone who was at my uni, right? Everyone wanted to get there. So that was like the sexy, shiny thing. And I think reading Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week was the first time I heard someone speak about that life in a way that was probably like not so glamorous, and kind of like unveiled the like unsexy side of it, I would say. As well as other books like The Millionaire Fast Lane. I didn't actually read that book, but I actually watched a YouTube video of someone who read it and was kind of summarizing this like slow path to success and like this faster path. So I think at that point, when I was like reading and watching other creators, I'm starting to like understand that, there is a life. I don't want the traditional life where you like retire at 55. In your 20s and your 30s and your 40s, you're probably your most physically fit, you're most physically active. As you get older, obviously your body is, you know, getting more tired, etc. Why should I leave any sort of like financial independence or financial freedom to that point where I'm like 60, 70, that's when I want to travel the world. Why can't I do that now in my 20s and my 30s when I could probably enjoy it a lot more? So I think that was like the start of my thought pattern of, okay, I want an unconventional life, so I'm going to have to do something financially to help me get there.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, it's funny, the book, The 4-Hour Workweek, I only read it this year, actually. But I think now, if we'd read this book pre-2020, like, it was probably revolutionary at the time. Like, but that life now, I think, is much more promoted. It's a bit more mainstream than it was probably pre-2020. But nevertheless, it's still a really good book.
Yeah.
And yeah, interesting to see how it influenced you. Not necessarily towards financial independence, but towards your lifestyle and the way you thought about making money in your career. In that sense. Yeah. And let's come back to your issue with the FIRE community, because I think you and I probably have the same issue, and it's around the definition of retiring early.
Oh, okay. So my thing is, I think for me, it's more so like the calculation of this. This is how I understand it. Again, I haven't been deep entrenched into the community, so you can tell me, like, if you know a bit more, then it'll be interesting to get your perspective. But this idea of like, you should save 25 times what you're spending in a month to get to your financial independence number is my main issue, because I feel like that is such a... It's a huge, like, if you actually calculate it, and I think for your average person who's still working, etc., if you actually calculate that number, it's a pretty big number. And I remember, like, on my course, I did the calculation for like the average person who lives in the UK. So like the average salary in the UK, what is it, like 33k or something like that? And then also the stat is that the average household also spends 27k. So if you're going to do £27,000 times 25, I think the number was, maybe it was like maybe like around 700k or whatever. But to get to that amount in invested money or invested savings, most people are just not going to get there. It's a very, very huge amount of money to like try to get to. And yes, you can do all these swanky things to help you get there, but I think when you set that as your goal, it can feel a lot more unattainable. So the way I kind of like to look at it is, when it comes to financial independence, I actually split it out like between financial stability, financial independence, and financial freedom. So the first stage for me, if you want to like go on the wealth path, is financial stability. And that's just when like you have a good enough job that is able to cover all of your needs and then some of your wants, and you have a good enough job that you can start saving, right? That's, for me, I would see that as financial stability. I then see financial independence as when you have enough passive income to cover your necessities. So it's not like living this lavish life, but it's like, okay, I have enough passive income coming in that at least like my rent, my car payment, my health insurance, anything that is like necessary for me to survive is there. So therefore at that stage, it's like, even if my job was to let me go or if I was to quit, I know that my basics are covered. So that's what I see financial independence as. And then for me, the last stage is like financial freedom. This is when you have like, I don't know, people call it like F off money, right? When you have so much money that you don't actually have to like worry about money anymore, right? If you want to get on a first class flight, you can do that. If you have kids and you want to send them to certain schools, you can do that. So I distinguish between those two things, financial independence and financial freedom. And I think most people can get to financial independence with enough diligence. And there's so much freedom that comes with financial independence that I think most people can and should hopefully be able to experience. So that's kind of my issue with it. And then on the other side, probably a bit more of a smaller issue, but I think when you go down the path of like, well, I don't know if this is what everyone in the community does, but you know, people who are like, don't spend anything, I'm just going to go like super hard, saving every single penny and like decrease my quality of life for that goal. I think that's fine. If whoever wants to do it can do it, right? I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it, but for me, as I'm working towards like being in a better financial position, I still want to enjoy my money as well. I don't want to like, you know, it's kind of like, I don't want to say like maybe I'd liken it to like a fad diet, right? Like when you go super extreme, and then sometimes like when I see people do that, specifically relating to like diets here, or even people who like, I work with people on like when it comes to money, right? When people set extremely strict budgets, those are people who tend to not even stick with anything. They'll follow it for like 2 weeks and then they'll hate their lives for the 2 weeks that they do it. And then all of a sudden it's like, I don't even want to budget anymore. Don't even mention the word budget into me, because my experience of doing it was so horrible. And that's because like you go from one extreme to the other. So I guess my other issue is probably a little bit to do with like the extremism side that some people can take it to. But I'd be interested to hear like what your thoughts about the movement is as well.
Yeah, no, I think very valid the points you've expressed, especially around the number. Another video I was watching this week or last week was from George Camel from Ramsey Solutions, and he was talking about, how people doing FIRE get very fixated on a number, and it can almost become the be-all and end-all of life in that sense, and your whole life's purpose becomes achieving this number, and you miss out on so many other things as a result. What my issue with it is like, what is retiring? Like, are you not going to do anything? Like, you're going to sit on the beach all day? Because many people who achieve financial independence, like take yourself, for example, even like you have financial independence, you technically retired from corporate life, but you still got businesses, activities, things you do. But you probably have a lot more freedom in terms of how you carry out those activities, where you do it from, that kind of thing. I've seen it with other guests on the podcast as well. So I think no one really retires as such. People just take a different direction in life, and do things a different way.
Agreed. And I think, why would I want to like get to the point of like retired in my mid-20s? I've still got so much of life to go that I have to do something with my life. And I think there's also, this is slightly off topic, but there's also this statistic that like, I can't remember what it is, but it's like sometimes, don't quote me on this, but it was like certain people who retired early and didn't have like anything to do were also more likely to die early, because your body kind of reacts to when you wake up and you don't have anything to look forward to, even if it's just like, let's say, talking about people who are more like in their 60s, 70s, right? Even if the thing that you're looking forward to is just like, oh, I have to care for my dog, or I'm looking after my grandkids, etc. There was a study that showed that those people were more likely to live longer than people who retired and literally had like no aim and no direction in life. And that's not really what you want. But even like being in your 20s, etc., I think that is one of the things that the 4-Hour Workweek talks about, that like it's not about retiring and doing nothing and like just doing nothing. It's about creating a life where you can like have mini breaks when you want to. You can like work really hard for a period and then maybe like take 2, 3, 4 weeks off. Or there are some people who do like six months on, 6 months off, or 6 weeks on, 6 weeks off, and just having that flexibility to work on the things you want, when you want, how you want it. I feel like for me, that's what like this financial independence is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. The mini breaks concept, really stuck with me as well from the book. So good to bring up. All right, so staying on financial independence and money, what are the biggest money moves, the most important money moves you've made that have made you successful?
So I would say the most important ones was, one, I think not getting caught up with lifestyle inflation. For me, the most important thing was like, if I wanted to get to this place, I need to invest as much as possible. And so I have to keep my expenses as low as reasonably possible. And so I think that there's a lot of mindset work that comes with that, because it's very easy, especially if you're in a job where you're seen as a high earner, to feel like, oh, I have to have a nice car, or I have to be in this like fancy apartment or whatever. But one of the major things that I did was like living at home, right? I had enough money to move out, but I stayed at home so that I can save as much money as possible, even for university. That was one of the reasons why I wanted to go to a London university, is so that in my second year, like I had my first year experience like living out, but then in my second year, I moved back home so that I can save more money. Did that for my third year as well. And so like soon after graduating, like literally a couple months after graduating, I was able to purchase my first investment property, just because I was at home. And whilst other people were like partying and like spending all their money and etc., I had a different mindset towards what I wanted to do with my money. So I would say that like living at home for as long as I could was a big money move. And then I would also say putting my money into assets. One of my like mantras for my 20s is to focus on acquiring as many assets as I can, as opposed to liabilities. So, for example, and I'm not recommending this to anyone, I'm just saying this is my current situation, right? Like, I don't have a car, never bought a car, never leased a car, because I'm just focused on getting as many non-depreciating assets as possible. And like, when I'm thinking about, okay, how I'm going to spend my money, I'm always thinking assets over liabilities, especially in my 20s. So that even feeds into like getting an investment property versus like residential properties. So yeah, I'd say those two things are probably quite critical. And then I'd probably say like multiple streams of income as well.
Yeah. Another one that you haven't mentioned here, but has become apparent throughout the interview, and even when you were saying it there, is starting early. By starting early, you've set yourself up. I mean, you're in your 20s still, I guess, and you've got, like way more assets than the majority of people would have possibly in their whole lifetime. So you've made like some really smart moves and set yourself up nicely as well. So that's good. So we'll use this question to transition into the next section. You made a video recently called Why I'm Building Wealth, or Why I'm Building Across 3 Countries. What's the answer? Why?
Oh. My why is, I feel like every all countries have different pros and cons. And I think when you're able to build across multiple countries or live across multiple countries, you are able to experience the best of what each country has to offer. And I think that you're also able to be a bit more strategic. So, for example, certain countries are better in terms of lifestyle. Certain countries are better in terms of taxes. Certain countries are better in terms of education. Like, there are so many different factors. Obviously, you choose what is important to you. But for me, it's like living across like 3 continents, 3 countries, building across 3 continents and 3 countries allows me to like live the life that I want to live whilst getting the best of each country, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. The last guest I had on the podcast, Ladislas Maurice, he's called the Wandering Investor. He's also about like global diversification and all of that. He talked about it a lot from the perspective of diversification as protection against risks kind of thing. Do you see it from that perspective as well?
I think for me, it's another pro, especially if it comes to like, I don't know, like financial investing and stuff. I think it's another pro, but I would say that mine isn't purely just based on like financial investing reasons. So I guess for the people who are listening, so my current 3 countries are the UK, which is obviously where I'm from. So I see that as a really good place to kind of set up a certain level of a financial / investing base. So I've looked into like property investing across multiple countries, and I think some countries offer really good yields, etc., maybe more opportunities, bigger houses, etc. But I think the UK property market is one of the most developed in the world, and I think when it comes to things like capital appreciation, the UK, if you pick the right investment, you can get a really, really good capital appreciation. I also think the pound is one of the best currencies to earn in because it's one of the strongest currencies, and it's also one of the most stable currencies. And I think now that I've lived in, or I would say now that I in Dubai, I covered a lot of emerging market countries. So let's say like Egypt, Lebanon, etc. And you see what happens to people's lifetime savings because of their currency and because of like the amount of debt that their governments are in, etc. I think the UK, like you can almost be quite confident that when your money is invested there, like it's probably one of the best places to have your money invested. So I see it as a good place for setting up a financial base and like having properties so that I can continue earning rental income in the pound, etc., because that covers me quite well when I move elsewhere. And then my second location is in the UAE. So that's where my business is. And so I run a network that connects like young professionals in Dubai and then also young professionals who want to move to Dubai to helping them make that move. And I think that I love having a business in Dubai because I do definitely see Dubai as somewhere for the future. It's growing insanely quickly. The population is growing insanely quickly. And I think that there are a lot of things that some Western countries are doing that is pushing away a lot of the people within the country. And I think Dubai tends to solve quite a lot of those problems. So I do think that Dubai will become like an increasingly popular destination for expats to move to. And so therefore I think like starting a business there kind of makes sense, because even though Dubai has been around for a little bit longer now, but I mean, if you look at the pictures of what Dubai was when I was born in 1997, it looks nothing like what it is today. And that's only, 26 years ago. So I think starting a business there, you're still quite an early mover in the market. So I see that as a really good place to start a business in summary. And then my third location is in South Africa. And what I really love here is just the lifestyle that I'm able to afford, given that I earn in the pound, being able to spend in the rand while still making in the pound is a massive advantage to have a pretty good quality of life here. So it's diversification, but not just on a monetary basis. I have also invested in South Africa. I do have a property here, and yes, that helps with diversification, but the money, I call it like a lifestyle investment property rather than just a purely financial investment property. There's another angle to it than just money and like currency diversification, for example.
Yeah. Nice. If you're traveling or living abroad and you need to use a different currency from your home currency, then check this out. I've been using a multi-currency platform called Wise for many years now, and it's a great solution for people who are looking to send money abroad, convert money, and spend money in foreign currencies. Wise offers competitive exchange rates with low commissions, meaning that when you need to exchange money to another currency, you don't overpay to do so. You can get bank details for a range of different currencies to be able to send and receive money abroad. You also receive a virtual debit card so that you can make purchases in other currencies, which is particularly useful when you're traveling. And you also have the option to get a physical debit card if you wish as well. This is an absolute must-have for me when I travel. I've been to multiple different countries around the world with my Wise card, and I'm very happy to have done so. It also helps me on a daily basis when it comes to banking in multiple different countries. Sign up to Wise today using the link in the video description on YouTube or in the show notes on podcasting platforms. And now, let's get back to the podcast. We'll hold that thought about early adopters of Dubai, because I think it's an interesting one that I want to explore when we come around to to talking about you move to Dubai. Before we talk about that, what drove your decision to leave the UK?
Interestingly, I was never someone who was like, I'm going to leave the UK, I'm going to leave the UK. I actually saw my whole life in London, like even moving to like Essex, which is like the suburbs, like that surrounds London, was like, no, that's far. Like London is my thing. I loved working in Canary Wharf and everything. So I never really saw myself like doing that until I was listening to a podcast. And then one of the ladies must have mentioned like, oh, people are earning like 2 times their salary in Dubai simply based off of like not having to pay taxes, but then also higher salaries. And I was like, is that really true? Let me check that out. And literally applied to one job on LinkedIn just so I could see what the salary was, and then ended up getting that job. And then when I moved to Dubai, it was a big back and forth, because I was like, when I applied for the job, I had no intentions of moving to Dubai at all. But then when the opportunity came, I was like, oh, maybe this is something I should consider. And then from moving, I learned so much, like so much. You meet people when you travel, right? You meet so many different people, so many different walks of life. And I think Dubai is one of those places where, because the majority of people are expats, the majority of people have had to leave their country to come here. So everyone has a story, and it's not everyone that has the guts to like get up and leave their home country and move to another country. So when you speak to people in Dubai, there's a certain level of like mindset that they have. And I think it just really opened up my mind to like, oh my God, this is an amazing thing to do. Even if you just do it for a year or two, like living abroad, the personal development that you go through. And I think you learn more about the country that you're from when you leave it, especially with the UK, because I felt like I was able to see the UK from an outsider's perspective. And that was when I realized, oh my God, there are so many like advantages that you have even just by being British, especially by being British abroad as well. But that all happened with just like a podcast that I listened to, took action based off of it to see if what the lady was saying was true, and then ended up in Dubai, and then it all started from there.
Yeah. 100% agree with you on like how it opens your mind. I had the same exact reflections about the UK when I first moved abroad, which was 10 years ago. The first time I lived outside the UK, it gave me a much greater appreciation for the UK that I grew up in.
Where was that you went? Where was the first place you left to?
The first place I went to was Nantes, which is a city in the west of France, and that was for an Erasmus semester abroad.
Okay, cool.
Yes. Now, so you kind of answered the why did you move to Dubai as well, so that's great. So with that said, let's come back to the early adopter phrase used about Dubai, because I think I disagree with this, because I think Dubai is now at the point where the Dubai dream is everyone's dream, and the early adopters were the ones that moved maybe 2015 to 2020. Now, you look on social media, Dubai is like everywhere. I've had already 2 guests on the podcast that have interests or that live in Dubai. You're now the third. I love it. Like, don't get me wrong, I love Dubai. But I think the real opportunities, I mentioned this in another episode as well, countries you've been to as well, at least one of them, I think is Qatar and Saudi Arabia. I think these countries are Dubai like 5-10 years ago in its process of opening up. And I think when these countries catch up, that's going to open up a whole new world for people as well. So why do you think there's still opportunity in Dubai?
This is going to be interesting discussion. I don't think that there are many places that will get to Dubai's level. And the reason I say that is because Dubai is, when you speak to like, let's say Muslims who are actually quite strict, or people in Qatar, like I have a video on my channel where like I went to Qatar and stuff. A lot of them don't actually want it to be like Dubai, because they actually see Dubai as somewhere that is like a bit of like a Sodom and Gomorrah. I don't know if you are familiar with that reference, where like a lot of crazy stuff happens. They see it as kind of like Dubai has like bended to what the West has wanted, and like is no longer like respecting like Islamic laws and rules, and like it's like being overrun with like ideology from the West. And so even though these places, you're definitely right, are trying to continuously attract people from the West, because they're running out of oil as well, right? And so they're trying to do what Dubai has done, where there's a big part of their economy that is being sustained by expats. I don't know if they are necessarily going to be able to compete with Dubai if they aren't as open as Dubai is, because even with as open as Dubai is, in terms of the fact like you can wear what you want for the most part. Obviously, you're not going to wear something crazy to like the mosque or something like that. There are still people who think that it's too strict because, you can't openly kiss your partner on the street, or because you can't like smoke weed in public or something like that. People still think it's like really, really strict. And so I don't necessarily think that those other places, if they don't like massively change the values that they stand on, is going to be able to catch up with Dubai. And I think with Dubai, I think that, like you were saying, I think so many people want to move. So I think the PR is strong. And I think it got stronger probably like pre-COVID times. But you are right, though. I think the people who went there like 10, 20 years ago, I mean, the amount of like capital appreciation that they would have saw as well would have been crazy. But I still think it's at its infancy to what it can be, because even if you go to Dubai, if you see the rate at which they are building things, building more malls, like there's always cranes in the sky in Dubai, always cranes in the sky. So I still feel like it's got a way to go before it's developed. And there are a lot of industries that are in Dubai that are not strong yet, but I think they are going to be. So for example, the way I moved to Dubai was because my bank was finally opening up a certain division within Dubai finally, and I think that other banks, for example, are also going to do that, and I think Dubai's economy is still going to grow quite massively. So yeah, that's my counter to your argument.
Yeah, sure. No, I don't doubt that there's still opportunities in Dubai, and people will still move there. I just don't think. I think it's now more maybe not completely mainstream. Okay, but so just before mainstream. So there's still opportunities. People want to move there. but I wouldn't say people are starting to see it
Yes,
now already, and have seen it. So I think, the people, what I would consider like the early adopters are the ones that have the idea to do it first. That's my perspective. But you make some good points. And on the building thing as well, I remember I went to a beach club, like the same beach club twice when I went to Dubai. Once in end of 2019 and then start of 2022. I got a photo of me, like on the beach next to the beach club. The first photo in 2019, there was like a quarter built building in the background. When I went back in 2022, there were 3 fully complete buildings behind.
Crazy.
In the same spot.
The way it's developing is crazy.
Yeah. It was insane. Interesting one. So we'll continue a little bit about Dubai. We've talked about the good things about Dubai, but I think there's things that people overlook, and maybe Dubai is not for everyone. Because I think you've done a video about this as well. So what are reasons that you give for people not to move to Dubai?
I did a video about this, and some people were like, you just told us to move to Dubai, now you're saying don't move. I'm like, no, I'm not saying don't move. I'm just saying that there are pros and cons of living everywhere. So I would say one of the cons is the fact that for the majority of people, you're never ever going to get citizenship there. And maybe that's not a con for the country, because I could completely understand from, the ruler's perspective why you would not give citizenship. And I think that Dubai is able to maintain itself the way it is because the majority of people aren't citizens, because then you have an incentive to behave, because if you misbehave, you'll get kicked out because you don't have any like ownership, or you don't have any, this is not like your home, right? So if you misbehave, you can leave. And I think that's one of the things that makes Dubai super safe. So I don't even think they're going to change that too much, even though they do have things like the golden visa where you can stay for 5 years, 10 years at a time. That's still nothing compared to like citizenship that you can pass on to your children, etc. So I think that it's a con from the perspective of if you are someone who wants to gain another citizenship, and particularly through like naturalization, which is where, you spend a considerable amount of time in a country and then you get citizenship that way. And if you're choosing between 2 countries and it's really important for you to get a second citizenship, then I would say that maybe Dubai might not be for you, especially if you're actually looking at a second home. So rather than just being an expat, which is kind of seen, which usually is used for people who eventually want to go back home, right? Like they don't typically use expats for people who like permanently want to live in the country that they're moving to. If you permanently want to live somewhere, it might be the case that you want somewhere where you feel some sense of security through citizenship, and you wouldn't get that with Dubai. I did hear that like during 2020, like people who thought Dubai was their permanent home were kind of told like, go back home. Like, so that is something to bear in mind when you're living somewhere, or you're trying to make somewhere your home that hasn't given you home status. So I'd say there's that. I would say, what is another con? Obviously, if you don't like hot weather, like I had some colleagues who were like allergic to the sun. I didn't even know such people existed, but there are people who are like allergic to the sun. So it's like, being in a country that is like hot almost 24/7, and especially like this time of the year where it's like 40 degrees, I don't think that's going to be the best weather for you. And I think as well, another factor would be like, it's not the most walkable city. So if you're someone who likes, I say nature, but last time I said nature, people were like, the desert is nature. So if you're someone who likes a lot of greenery and like you want to go greenery, parks, fields, marshes, all of that stuff, it's not the most green city and it's not the most walkable city. If you're in a good location sometimes, you can get, like I was on a canal, and anything that was on the canal was quite walkable. Or like if you're on like a marina, like like marinas are quite popular in Dubai. If you're living on that, then sure, you can navigate. But in general, it's not the most walking friendly city or trees friendly city, such that like a way of marketing certain communities is like calling it like the greens. It's like, okay, if you really want green stuff, we are creating a community that has trees, so come and live here, because that's how much like trees just aren't a thing. So I think if you're like a person who loves green nature, then I don't know if Dubai would be for you. Also, lifestyle wise, some people find it to be very fake and like too flashy and too, I don't know, like there's a lot of like, fillers and like Botox and surgery and designer. It's very, very flashy. It's very in your face. If you don't like that stuff, seeing someone come past you with a red Lamborghini, blue Lamborghini, green Maserati, yellow G-Wagon, all of that crazy stuff. If you don't like that, then also that might not be a city for you. I think those are like the main things. I don't know if you have anything from your perspective.
No, I think, that's a fair list, and I'd probably agree with most of them as well.
Yeah.
So talking about South Africa, your third country, you moved there recently as well, I understand, because it was quite recent that you quit your job in Dubai. What made you choose South Africa over perhaps other African countries or anywhere else in the world as well? And how was your experience in South Africa?
Yeah, I think this is a question that I get a lot, especially because I'm Nigerian. So people are like, well, why didn't you go to Nigeria? I think, first of all, South Africa is the only, I don't even like this categorization of countries, but we'll just use it for purposes of explanation. It's the only non-third world country in Africa. So it's actually classified as like a second world country. And I think just to like kind of sum that up, South Africa has had a very different economic development trajectory than most other African countries because of the difference in like colonial settlement versus like colonial extraction in most of the other African countries, which has meant that it's developed a lot quicker, and it's the most similar that you will get to living in Europe in Africa. So there are certain places in South Africa that if I took a picture of it, you wouldn't even know if it was in Africa or if it was in somewhere in Europe. And I actually argue that there are a lot of places in South Africa that is much better developed than some European countries that I've been to. So in terms of like assimilation into South Africa, it's been almost seamless because it feels very familiar, even though it's not a country that is like, I wasn't born here, I don't have family here. It feels very familiar because of the levels of development. And I guess, so there's that. I also wanted to, I like South Africa as well because you have like Cape Town, which is more like beachy, filled with digital nomads, very much vacay vibes, almost like 24/7 throughout the year. But then you also have Johannesburg, which reminds me a bit more of like London in terms of like the industrial or like the business focused nature of it. And you can get like those two extremes kind of within one country. So I like it for that reason. And I just think even in terms of like the infrastructure here, it's really good. The quality of like properties here is really good as well, which is something that I'm interested in. And it's also that reflects a lot of like what you see and like who you're able to access here. So that's kind of like a summary of why I chose here.
Nice, yeah. I think there's even a series on Netflix about like wealthy people from South Africa as well. I can't remember the name of it, but I've seen trailer for it.
Oh.
And I believe they're from South Africa. Yeah. That's really interesting, because I think outside of South Africa, I think the reasons that you explained, like about its level of development compared with the rest of the continent, made sense as well. But in addition, there's maybe two other African countries that perhaps come to mind when you think about, living abroad and international living is maybe Egypt and Morocco. Morocco, obviously, fantastic culture, history kind of thing, and Egypt, same. And I think they draw a lot of digital nomads. But because I think someone would perhaps be more comfortable there on a temporary basis, maybe it would be a bit much for someone to live there on a full-time basis. Not to say that, people wouldn't do that. But so do you think from your perspective, South Africa is also not better, but, it's somewhere that you could kind of have some long-term stability as well?
I think the biggest con here is the crime rate. So this one of the highest crime rates in the world. It's one of those things where it's like, it's everywhere, but it's more so localized because South Africa is also the most unequal country in the world. So there are places that, like I've mentioned, are super, very, very, very well developed. And there are places that are, not so much. And in those places, you have a lot of crime. So I think in terms of like that for me is like one of the biggest cons because If I just think down the line, like let's say if I have children, etc., I might think twice of like, okay, do I really want my children, for example, to grow up somewhere where I might have to be a bit more worried about like, you know, their safety, etc., versus like Dubai, where you probably like never ever have to worry. Like I see kids like 7 years old roaming late hours of the night. So yeah, that's the only thing that makes me think about like the long-term viability here. But otherwise, I would say yeah, for sure. But it depends on like what you want, because for example, like I also really like Nigeria. Obviously I'm Nigerian, but Nigeria is the places where like most expats would probably want to go, which is like Lagos Island. It's also like quite developed as well, but it's very hectic in terms of like, you know, it's massively overpopulated. It's a very like rushed, it's a bit like London in that sense, where there's just a lot going on all the time. And I think certain places in Egypt, like Cairo, for example, it's very much the same. There's a lot of people, there's a lot going on. So if you wanted a more like chilled relaxed vibe, then I think South Africa might be good. Ghana is also another place that people like to go to because of this like peaceful nature and stuff. So I think it honestly really depends on like what you're looking for when you want to become a nomad. But for me, yeah, South Africa definitely is the best option.
Perfect. And so do you have a ranking or a preference amongst your three countries of how you would rate them in order of preference, or you couldn't do it?
Yeah, but it all came out they all averaged the same. Like in terms of all the pros and cons of the countries, they all averaged out to be yellow at the end. And I think that's a good way to kind of like summarize for me why I've picked these three countries, because, and if you kind of notice, like if I had one factor, it'd be green in one country, yellow in one country, red in the other. So for example, if I took taxes, for example, it'd be like green for Dubai, yellow for South Africa, and then red for the UK. If I took safety, it'd probably be green for Dubai, yellow for the UK, red for South Africa. So they all kind of balance out each other, I would say. So I don't really have a preference, to be honest. It just depends on what I want out of life in that stage.
Yeah, it comes back to exactly what you said at the start about building across three countries, that you build across three countries because you want different things from different places. So makes sense. Exactly,
yeah. Do you have a preference for the UK versus Spain?
Spain wins easily.
Oh.
Yeah.
Why is that for you?
Just think the quality of life is better. The weather is better. Yeah. I mean, in the UK, it's just raining all the time here. Summers in Madrid, they're a bit brutal. Like now it's like probably 33 degrees outside, so AC is a must. But yeah, Spain is incredibly diverse as well. So you can get like UK style weather up in the north of Spain, or you can get like tropical weather on the islands, pretty much like best part of the year. So yeah, Spain is great.
And I think what's good with Spain is it's close. I think that's the only thing that I don't love so much about my current setup, is they're quite far. It's not easy to just like pop back to the UK. It's like 11 hours from South Africa, 6 hours from Dubai. Whereas I think with Spain, it's like pretty close. So I'm sure like you can go home quite frequently as well.
I should be able to, but because I live in Newcastle and there's no direct flight from Madrid to Newcastle, it's a pain. So I either have to stop in London, Amsterdam or Paris, and then fly, with a stopover. Or another option that I've got as well now that I've got a car, which I don't really fancy now that I've done a similar drive, is like drive to Alicante and then fly to Newcastle from Alicante. And the drive is like 4 hours from Madrid. So it's a bit much. Yeah. But yeah. So anyways, but I like Madrid, and that's great. Cool. Well, Lámidé, this was a great conversation. Thank you so much for everything you've shared. We finish on a fun question, as I do with all my guests. So I was watching your videos, trying to think of something to ask you. And then I saw e-scooters in Qatar, and I was like, e-scooters, there we go, because I love e-scooters. I have my own, actually, because in Spain you can't have your own. Obviously in the UK, like private ones aren't allowed. But tell us about your experience with e-scooters. Do you have a preferred like e-scooter company? When do you use e-scooters?
I think, did I use e-scooters in the UK? I don't think I have. No, those are the Boris bikes. No, I haven't used it in the UK. But in Dubai and in Qatar, they're quite popular. So I think I first used it in Dubai. I loved it, just whizzing around. And then in Qatar as well, I also loved it. But man, it was expensive in Qatar. Like it was it costs more than the Uber drive. So yeah, covering the same distance. So it's very expensive, but I just love it. I think you just feel free again, and like, I don't know. But yeah, I don't use it that often, but on holiday, I think it's a nice vibe just to like feel the breeze. It's a good way of like sightseeing, but moving quite quickly, covering ground quite quickly. So yeah, it's always fun.
100%, yeah. That exact reason is why I took it in Batumi in Georgia last year. So I got a lot of sightseeing done thanks to e-scooters, and in Tel Aviv as well when I went to Tel Aviv last year. Saw a lot on the e-scooters as well. Here it's more for practical reasons, because unless I go like outside of my town, like on the outside of Madrid, where I need a car, then I can pretty much move around with my e-scooter. Like go to the gym, I'm there in 5 minutes on the e-scooter. Like even before I had a car, like go to the supermarket just with the e-scooter and just like prop the bags on the handles and then ride along home. And it made life so much quicker, so much easier.
Do lots of people have e-scooters in where you are?
They are quite popular, yeah. Much to the dismay of a lot of drivers on the road, which is understandable. What I think is good though in Spain is that they've introduced a lot of regulation for them. So you may need to have a driver's license to ride it on the road. I'm not sure. You're supposed to wear a helmet. Otherwise you can be fined €200. You should also like obviously respect like the rules of the road, which is something I always try to do. And actually now I rarely have problems on e-scooters as well, because I learned how to react to drivers and get around without any problems. But then you've got people who go without helmets, who just cut between the traffic because they want to be at the front of the line quicker.
Dangerous.
Like you got 14-year-old kids that double up on the scooters and go across like zebra crossings, and it's just like they give it such a bad name to e-scooters, and like they get a bad rap because of like the bad actors basically.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, great. Well, with that, we will end the episode. So thank you again so much for coming on, Lámidé.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that episode, guys. I'll leave the links to Lámidé's YouTube channel in the video description on YouTube and in the show notes on the podcasting platforms. Remember that if you'd like to support the work that Millennials with Money does and support the podcast, then you can do so by signing up as a member on YouTube or by becoming a Patreon. And in return, you'll get access to some exclusive benefits as a result. Till next time, I'll see you on the next one. And let's get this money.